Good day all. Today's talk will be on the Adam Smith problem, or Das Adam Smith problem, by myself, Jacques Roux, for the History of Economic Thought Scholar Profile. The main talking points of today's presentation would be firstly to understand where the Adam Smith problem as a term originated from and the historical schools that outlined the inconsistencies in Smith's writings. Thereafter, just a quick recap on the two Smiths as outlined by Wilson and Dixon, who called Smith two Smiths, as one Smith in the Theory of Moral Sentiments and another Smith who wrote the Wealth of Nations. Thereafter, we're going to conclude and see what consists of the Adam Smith problem as outlined by different scholars over the years. And then at the end we can have some final thoughts on the matter. The origins of the Adam Smith problem stems from the German historical school of thought, who first outlined the so-called problem between the inconsistencies of Smith's work. The term Das Adam Smith problem originated from the German historical school's hostile stance at the time towards British laissez-faire, which was presented by Smith in the 18th century after his works was published. And the German school took the stance because at the time being, it's important to note that the German economy was lagging significantly behind that of the British economy. And therefore Hans Müller, one of the founders of the German historical school, criticized Smith for being too one-sided as a representative of the English economic interests. Furthermore, Friedrich List was one of Smith's biggest critiques regarding laissez-faire and stated that laissez-faire would not necessarily benefit developing countries at the time as a remedy, and he advocated that nations focus on productive power rather than exchange in power and prosperity, which obviously is trade. Friedrich List also stated that self-interest would not lead to the greater good of society. Therefore, he emphasized that unity must be the first condition of the security, well-being, and progress and civilization of the individual, and not self-interest as Smith presents in his Wealth of Nations. Wilson and Dixon broke the Smith up into two Smiths, and therefore called them two Smiths because they saw one Smith writing from a different perspective while writing the Theory of Moral Sentiments and another in the Wealth of Nations. So it's important to just recap the main themes of the Theory of Moral Sentiments and the Wealth of Nations to understand where the Adam Smith problem originated from the German school of thought, where the Theory of Moral Sentiments focused on ideas that were presented by Smith regarding the ideas of humans as social creatures, where he emphasized that social actions is a better guide to moral action than reason. Even though Smith did advocate self-interest, he admitted that as social beings, we are inclined to care and exert sympathy toward others in our society. Thereafter, obviously, the Wealth of Nations, Smith's most famous publication. Smith advocated for self-interest of the individual itself, where one needs to fulfill one's own needs and interests, and therefore a network of self-interested individuals would emerge in society, and therefore the society as a whole would benefit. Also, one of Smith's most famous advocations was that of the free market economy in the post-mercantile period. So the main arguments for the Adam Smith problem, as the German historical school argued, is they stated that there is an irreconcilable difference between the Wealth of Nations and the Theory of Moral Sentiments, Smith's two most famous works. The German school argued that the Theory of Moral Sentiments is fundamentally based on a sympathetic concept of human nature, as we just saw in the previous slide, whereas the Wealth of Nations, on the other hand, portrays the individual as a self-interested being who seeks only to benefit himself. one can see obviously how being sympathetic and being self-interested and self-driven, on the other hand, can be inconsistent or contradictory. But I think it's also important to remember that when Smith advocated for self-interest, he advocated for self-interest in a positive manner, to look after oneself and not to harm other or benefit oneself at the cost of someone else. So we can conclude that the German school notes that these two components are contradictory, and they could not understand how one can be self-driven and self-interested at the same time and still be sympathetic towards others. Thus, this was the problem that emerged according to from the German school, uh, which obviously then stated that Smith was an inconsistent author. Final thoughts on this is that I think one should look at it as a subjective manner, and it would be up to yourself to define if this Adam Smith problem is a problem or an actual problem. And it's very subjective if one could say that Smith was an inconsistent writer, or whether Smith was not an inconsistent writer, as Smith was also, as many authors, just human, and very it's not uncommon for writers to have some inconsistencies in the work of the discipline. That concludes the talk for Does Adam Smith problem for today. Thank you very much for watching, and have a look at some further readings on the Adam Smith problem to further establish whether it was a problem or not. Thank you.